Good morning, everyone. How's it going today? I'm going to take a couple minutes to get my palette set up. So for today, you'll want to have your full range of colors. Hi, Jamie. Great to see you. You'll want to have your full range of colors today and have a little black on there if you have it. I'm going to show two different techniques today, so you might want to work with two canvases today. Small or even paper. You can work on paper, that's completely fine. So one of these I'm going to do on paper, and then one I'm doing on this canvas. And I went ahead, I had something on there ready, so I went ahead and I painted over it with this dark color. So you could choose a dark color like a dark blue, but you could also, just to be experimental, you could try like a fuchsia or something like that, or a dark purple, dark red, whatever you want. A gray would be fine, burnt umber. It's up to you. But I do suggest starting off with something, some kind of a base, just to cover up the canvas weave if you can. So I'm going to just take a couple minutes to prepare, and we'll see if anyone else joins us this morning. I know one person contacted me that she's out doing election poll watching, and I said, good for you. I think that's great. Okay, and then I'm also going to work with my Naples yellow today and my titanium white. So I'm going titanium white, Naples yellow, cadmium, medium. I'm going to use some of this cadmium red, medium hue. It's important to have some good opaque colors today. So yellow ochre is a good one. The light is weird today. Yellow ochre is a nice opaque pigment, as is the Naples yellow. I'll give myself a little burnt sienna. Okay. And then as far as colors go, on the dark side, I'm going to do alizarin crimson and dioxazine purple, or some kind of a violet purple. You'll want a dark blue today. I'll go ahead and use my ultramarine blue. Prussian blue is a really awesome blue if you have that. Okay. I'm going to use some phthalo green. Why not? Some burnt umber. And I'll put some Mars black off to the side. But again, with my black pigment, I like to be sparing with it. Let's see if there's any other colors. You'll also want a charcoal today. If you have your acrylic glazing fluid, you'll want that. Some water. Okay. And I like to leave my white, I'm always refueling on my light colors. So I like to leave those out and have them handy. Okay, so today we're going to work on painting a night scene, and I haven't really taught this before, and honestly, I haven't really painted many night scenes, a few, and I will say the biggest thing to keep in mind with a night scene is that your source of light is going to be very concentrated. There's going to be a lot of contrast between your lights and your darks. Whether the source of light is the moon, which today I said full moon painting, whether it's the moon or maybe it's the flash of the photographer's camera, maybe it's the street lamp. The source of light is usually very I guess, for lack of a better word, small. And it will cast these very dramatic highlights on things. So that's probably the most important thing to think about. And then often the source of light is diffused a bit. Although when we look at a lot of photographs, this is why it's weird. Working from photographs is an interesting thing. When we look at a lot of photographs, there is like a sharpness to a lot of the images that you might not see in real life. I'm going to admit, I didn't wear glasses till several years ago. And the first time I looked at the moon with glasses on was just like, it was the first time I saw the moon clearly. It's pretty amazing. But it is kind of nice sometimes when you're painting to take your glasses off because you will see shifts in value in a really interesting way. So the other thing today is we are going to talk about the difference between painting alla prima and painting with the glazing technique. And I've pretty much covered both of these techniques. Alla prima is like a fancy word. It means in the moment or at the first attempt, I believe. And basically what it refers to is when you paint wet into wet. So you're painting quickly, you're painting usually with a lot of paint. The results can look somewhat messy, but actually like it's hard to control your paint sometimes when it's all wet like that. But we're going to play around with that today. I would say this painting, I did alla prima. The general, I'm holding it upside down, even though it pretty much looks abstract. But I would say the general characteristics of an alla prima painting is you see like the brush strokes. You see the brush very thick on the surface of the painting. If you can remember Van Gogh's Starry Night, I would consider that an alla prima painting. I am going to share this image in the chat of Starry Night on the Rhone. And it's interesting because this image really shows the thickness of the paint in a way that a lot of images of paintings don't show. So if I share it the right way, I hope that opened for everyone. Yeah. So you can really see the brush strokes in this particular image. And you can see how thick the paint is. And this is why it's so different to see an artist like Van Gogh's work in real life, because you can see all that brushwork that you can't always see in a photograph. So that's, when I think of Alla Prima, I mean, even though, like I said, he was working with oils, we're going to be working with acrylic. So there's a difference there. Hey, Lisa, hooray. And then just to show you an example of like a glazed painting, a painting that would be built up in, actually, I want to share this first because I just think it's a gorgeous painting. This is a painting by Claude Monet. Hooray, Barbara. And hi, Lisa. So here's a really beautiful painting that I shared in the chat there by Claude Monet. And isn't it just, I mean, just the gestures, the marks. And here again, you can see the paint on the surface. And you see these very, like, I would say like distinct points of light, but they're still very diffuse. Like in this situation, the lights, the water is breaking up the light. Okay, and now I want to share something that I would consider more of a painting that's made using the glazing technique. With the glazing technique, you don't see, it's usually painted on a board or a smooth surface. You can get really, really dramatic shifts in color, and the layers are built up gradually. They're built up with transparent layers of paint, and you often won't see the brush strokes as much. With a glazed painting, it's a little more, things are smoothed out. Edges are smoothed out a little more. And then I just wanted to share this painting, and I don't even know where it came from, but it has very soft edges that I like a lot. Very simple and soft. And I would say this was probably actually done in one shot also. If y'all are familiar with Bob Ross, I would say he's an alla prima painter because he does, everything is wet into wet. And he does it all in one shot. But when you're working with oils, you're able a little better to blend your paintings or blend your brush strokes. So I just shared this array of paintings so you know, like, you have choices and there's so many different ways to portray the night sky. There is a Wikipedia entry on painting night sky, or the night sky in paintings. And they talk about like the symbolism of the nighttime, like meaning kind of the unknown, the spooky, evil in some cases, and the source of light could be God, could be magic, could be truth. So that, you can think about it too in terms of symbolism. There's a lot of interesting symbolism there when you're painting a night scene, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, so like I said, I want to try both techniques, both approaches, so you can see the difference. So I thought what we could do first is, first what you'll want to do is paint a base down for your alla prima painting. And like I said, it could be a dark blue, dark purple, a red, it could be burnt sienna, whatever you want. Just, I would say go ahead, if you have a white canvas, go ahead and cover it with something else. Let's set that aside, let's let that dry. And then in the meantime, we'll just start and kind of play around with glazing a little bit. So you can see the different techniques and how to build the painting. So I'm going to start with a charcoal drawing first. And let's see. I did share a couple images down below in the description, but if anyone needs an image shared, let me know. And I can share one here in the chat. But let's see, I think I am going to start with, I shared this picture of a tower it down below in the chat, and I also shared it in the email last night that I sent out. And this photograph has obviously been very manipulated by the photographer. So we can use it how we should take creative license to change it how we want to. I will say this was found under the Creative Commons licensing law, so you don't have to worry about breaking any rules that you're appropriating someone's photograph. But the thing that's most striking about this is just that really dramatic sense of light there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first use my charcoal and try to draw this as a charcoal drawing. Very quick, very loosely. I personally like when things are off center a little bit, so I'm actually going to place that tower a little bit off center here. So just do a loose drawing. I'm going to just angle this for now and just try to establish the values, the lights and the darks of what you're seeing. Now, the other thing about a nighttime painting is often things will be in silhouette. You'll see a lot of tree branches. And in this case, with this particular photograph, our trees are in silhouette. Whenever I have something that's in silhouette like that, I actually usually paint it later. But just to indicate where these silhouettes are going to go, I'm actually going to just kind of loosely scribble in where they're going to go. And as you're making this drawing, you'll also become more aware of the shift of values in the sky and how it gets brighter towards the horizon of the sky. I'm sorry, the horizon of the landscape. But you want to, in this case, the source of light is really obvious that it's off to the left, shining onto the tower. So the next thing I'm going to do is get a good, soft, flat brush. And I'm going to use my glazing medium, which is just clear acrylic paint with no pigment in it. And I'm going to go ahead and maybe blend some of this charcoal. You could also, if you want to, actually, why don't we just do it? Let's go ahead and take a dark color. Let's take like our purple, if you have your purple. Just take a little bit of that. Mix it into your paint, into your glaze, so you'll get this really thin, transparent glaze. And you can use that to smooth your charcoal marks. And again, I know I'm working really fast. This might be something you just kind of watch and try later. Or you can work on this for the whole session today. There is also a benefit to working flat, like with this. It can be a little bit easier to blend depending on what your surface is, especially if you're working on a board, like a primed board or something. I'm working on paper, so it's a little more absorbent, but it's amazing what a difference your surface will make. And to that end, I want to encourage you, like if you've always been painting on paper, try painting on a canvas board or a canvas in the future. If you've always been painting on canvas, try painting on a board or smooth paper. Just try different surfaces because it's amazing how they can shift what you're doing. So with this first layer of glaze, we're not going our darkest and we're not going our lightest. We're just putting that down. I like to say sometimes it's like it's like a watercolor. Okay, so this is where I'm at. I know it's really messy. I know I just sort of scribbled in the trees in the foreground. You might be a lot neater than this. Hi, Connie. But this is just layer number one. And from here, I'm going to let this dry before we go to the next step. So I'm going to just put this off to the side and let it dry. And then I'm going to switch modes. I'm going to talk about Alla prima painting. I hope that this is okay. I hope that y'all aren't getting really confused and befuddled. So I'm going to talk more about how I did something like this. I'm actually going to switch out photographs because I want to use a photograph where I can see. I'm going to use this. It's very similar to the one that I sent out. But I'm going to use this where there's kind of this diffused light and there's the silhouette of branches in front. And so the way I'm going to do this, the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to paint the moon and the sky, the background, the dark part first. Then I'm going to paint the branches over that. The image that I sent you, actually, I'll probably just use this image. This is the image I sent you all, and there's a link to it down in the description. And I actually like this image because it's hard to see with my iPad, but the brightness of those leaves you can really see really strong and really nice. So The light on those leaves is really good, and it has an autumn feeling to it. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use that image again. So for this painting, like I said, I'm going to start with the sky, the background of the sky first, and then I'm going to paint those branches into the paint, into the wet paint. And we'll talk about a good technique for doing that. So first, I'm going to take another soft bristle brush. I'm going to start with my Naples yellow, and I'm going to start by putting that moon down. And from here, I'm going to work loosely. Also kind of just making my own thing up too. I mean, you don't have to keep it exactly like what's going on in the photograph. So I want to get the sense of the light getting darker as it goes out towards the edges of the image. So I'm starting here with my moon. I might take a little of my titanium white for the middle of it to see if that kind of pushes up the coolness. And then I'll take my dark value. You can use your black, but I would suggest to start with, try mixing all your dark colors together like we did last week. I'm going to mix my dark purple, dark green, dark brown, dark red, dark blue. I'm just mixing them all together. And I'm going to start to work outwards. The reason why I say that is, again, like I see a lot of tutorials on painting the moon, and that's all like black and white. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's wonderful. But just to make this a little different than those, I want to encourage you to mix other colors into your black, just to see what kinds of variations you get. One thing I have learned is that painting dark colors is hard. It's hard to get that on video with all the light shining around it. So I want to make this a little more diffused looking. So I'm going to pick up some of that light paint and start to paint it around the edges here. I'm going to try to hold this up so you can see it. And try to get some of the gray clouds. And this is why I like using a chromatic black, because it's so hard to see. Okay, there we go. Some of these grays really start coming through when you're just adding some white in there. These purpley yellow grays will really start popping out in a really beautiful and interesting way, I think. And that's why I like to, like I said, like to use a little extra, use other colors in my black rather than just black. Here, I'll hold that up again so you can see those grays. So just enjoy this part of the process where you're getting, because this picture has some really nice grays in the sky, just enjoy getting a transition of going from very light then to these grays and then to dark. And the best way to do that is to work with your paint pretty thick, pretty loose. Don't be afraid to use a lot of paint on your brush. Sometimes, that can be one of the biggest hurdles, especially when people come to acrylic painting from watercolor painting. They're kind of like stunned by how much more material you need to use when you're working with acrylics. And yeah, I just really enjoy the different dark values that I can get in there. It's hard to see, like I have a little more purple on this side, a little more brown up here. Again, hard to see with all the reflections. And like I said, don't try to make it exactly like your photograph, because then it's gonna suffer a little. It's gonna look a little too overworked. I would say just try to get the basic feeling of the photograph. Um, just the lightness, the shift in values, the drama for now. Since the middle of the moon is a little bit cooler, I'm gonna take one teeny dab of blue and put it in my titanium white and just see. That's gonna make the center of my moon pop out a little bit more. And think about that Van Gogh painting. Make those brush strokes thick, like slather on the paint. Don't be afraid of the paint. And yeah, take liberty with your colors. We're just using the photograph as reference. We're not trying to duplicate it exactly. So I'm gonna just leave mine like that for now. It's hard to see. I do have a little more gray up there in the top of the painting than how it's coming on camera. So with acrylics, the Alla prima technique is a little bit, it's somewhat impossible. I mean, you have to paint really fast because like if you're going through what I'm going through, my paint is already dry. The drying rate of your paint will change depending on what time of day it is, and there's a lot of factors that can affect it. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do, this is my moon that I have at this point. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start painting those branches over the top. Now, since the paint is somewhat thick and somewhat wet, my suggestion is to find a really good, crisp, small flat. And I actually even prefer the brights that have this straight across bristle. It's cut straight across. This is a pretty good one because this one is really stiff. And the stiffness of your brush is going to help you kind of cut through your paint if necessary. And the other reason why I like these flat brushes is you'll get really beautiful variations in your branches. So it helps to prevent you having these like thick branches. This is really similar to the whiskers we painted, cat whiskers we painted last week. So I'm going to go ahead, even though I do see a lot of really wonderful highlights on the branches in this photograph, I'm just going to go ahead with my dark paint, a dark color, and I'm going to start painting the branches on in a dark, with a dark value. Now you might want to go ahead and mix up a nice healthy batch of dark, of black or something to work with. Okay. And you'll see as you're painting through the lighter colors, you might have some problems seeing your branch at first, but just get that line in there and move on. Don't worry about painting over and over and over it at this point. We're going to come back to it. For now, we're just trying to establish some of those lines that are going to go across from this spooky tree. See, that's what happens when you paint wet into wet. And the issues that come up is if you keep going back and trying to correct things right off the bat, that's when you start getting mud. So just try to, trust the process. For now, just try to get those lines in there, and then we'll work on popping them out in just a little bit. I like to twist my brush if I have to get some of the thickness and thinness of those lines. The really tiny little lines that are silhouette, I'm not going to bother with those just yet. I'm just kind of getting the main branches in here, or the main elements. These branches that are coming up from the bottom, I'm going to just indicate where those are going to go as well. And let your branches go off the page. And if you want to start indicating like how those leaves are going to come off of the branch, you can go ahead and do that. But you see with mine, like you're not really seeing a lot of the branches right now because it's mixing in with a light color underneath it. But I'm just going to be patient and trust the process. Maybe that should be my motto, my little tagline. So this is where I'm at right now. The next really fun thing is the orange. So we're going to start putting some orange in there. Again, my suggestion, use a small brush, either a flat You could try a round if you want to. I'm going to stick with my flat brush, my small flat. And the thing that's important about applying these orange highlights is you're going to need your paint to be opaque so that and you're going to need it thick. You're going to need to be able to just kind of put it on top of these dark areas. So I'm going to take cadmium yellow and cadmium red. I'm going to mix those together, and I'm going to use some Naples yellow. And even you might use a little of your yellow ochre. Those are all really good opaque colors. And I'm going to start placing those in. And again, I'm not trying to get exactly what I see in the photograph, but more the feeling of it. And that can be how you interpret it. But for those leaves to really stand out, the paint needs to be on there fairly thick. And to avoid it mixing with the paint underneath it, just lightly get that on top. Think about that Monet painting of the harbor that I shared, and just the way he very lightly placed that paint on top. Okay, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to get some of these highlights that I'm seeing in the branches. I'm using a little bit of burnt sienna, some red. I'm just trying different combinations out to get some of the variations that I'm seeing. So it's not all just so single, one note, so that there's some fun differences in there. And trying to get like that sense of light and drama. So I hope that's starting to make sense. I know this is turning into a very impressionistic painting, but you can see how there's like a little bit of drama here, just through the contrast of light and dark. I'm gonna go back and forth between my lights and darks and maybe try to get a little more of the details in the branches now. I'm gonna have to really get in there. These, like a good sharp flat brush is really good for getting, like for cutting through the paint if you have to. And then I just sometimes will take it in whatever direction I want to make the painting interesting. Um, and just break out of the photograph, look away from it. If you need to go back in with your moon color and reshape some of those branches, go ahead. It's a little bit tricky, just be warned. Sometimes it's nice to really cut away and make some of those branches really thin. And if you like this approach, I would say try more small, quick, thick paintings using this alla prima approach. I started painting this way because one weekend I had to get like 10 paintings ready for an art show. And I just did a bunch of really quick paintings, and I was really excited actually by the result of it. And so this is how I tend to paint now a little bit more. And yeah, you can go ahead, you can like jump away from the photograph and just get into like the brush strokes at this point, and just like having fun with the paint. And that's why I like this approach a lot, because for me, I just enjoy the material of the paint. I really enjoy the way it moves. It's very satisfying to me. And so this is why I tend to paint this way. But we will return to our glazing study in just a moment here. I'll use a lot of broken color, um, for moments like that. I'll use a few different colors on my brush stroke or on my brush. The only thing about this kind of painting is one has a tendency to just keep going and going and then like end up with a big blob of paint in the end. Or with acrylics, you can force it. If the paints are getting too dry, there's a tendency to force it a little bit. So try to keep the freshness and the immediacy of the painting when you're working. And again, just try to get like the feeling of your image and not necessarily the exact thing. I'm going ahead and I'm just starting to really add a lot of colors here. Okay, I'm going to go back to the glazing technique now to show you how you might proceed. So here's my two. I did two of the same picture. And you can compare and contrast. This one, I wouldn't say this is done yet, but I put an owl in this one. I put a silhouette of an owl in the branches. That's another thing you can think about with this is like put a silhouette of some scary Halloween creature. Okay, so getting back to the glazing painting, my next step would be to take a glaze, put it over the whole thing, and then paint my light colors into that or on top of that. So I'm going to use, since I'm doing this tower painting, there's a lot of that really intense blue. So I'm going to go ahead and use my ultramarine blue. The another really good color would be phthalo blue, although it's really bright. But I'm going to use some kind of a blue, a dark blue, and a lot of the medium so that it's clear. Now it's going to look a little bit white because when this is what is my word? When glazing medium is wet, it's a little bit milkier in appearance, and then it dries clear. So you see, it's like I'm taking a blue film and I'm putting it over the entire painting. And you see how it's really darkening this painting. So use a soft bristle brush and you can really blend that so you don't see any of the brush strokes. I probably should have gone a little smaller today. But you see how that's just putting that blue, a blue layer down. And I'm going over the whole thing. And this is why it's really important that it's transparent. So as I build up layer and layer of these dark colors, you can already see a richness occurring when the blue goes over the purple. You can, and that's over the charcoal. You can already see this real richness occurring with this technique. So in theory, what you're supposed to do is let this dry. And then I'm going to go in and paint some of my highlights in. So I'll paint the moon in here. When you paint into it while it's still wet, I mean, it's up to you. You can let it dry. You can paint into it when it's still wet. You can, if it's still wet, you can really blend it and get some nice blended qualities there. If you are working on a smooth board or something, that always makes it a lot easier to blend also. I'm just going to get put in some of that. I'm going to go ahead and put in some of my tower. In my picture, it's slightly green, but I don't know if we'll do it that way. I'm using a yellow ochre. And I'm going to paint this highlight in here. I'm going to take my dark color, some of the dark, and start to put in some of the details now. The glazing technique, in theory, should actually take like hours, hours and days to do. It's generally used for more precise paintings. I'm just doing this really fast. But I'm starting to put some details in, and then what I want to do in theory, when this is all dry, I'm going to do another full layer of color over all of this. So this is a good time. This would be a good time for me to put in some of the silhouettes of the trees. Now you can use a teeny tiny brush and get all of those branches. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to still work pretty quick. Okay, I'm going to indicate some of this brighter green in the foreground for now. Okay, so my next step here, oh, thanks, Jennifer. Hi. My next step now would be to let this dry and then do another dark layer over the whole thing, even in some cases over these light parts, but that you have to make sure they're dry. And I don't think this is dry right now. So I'm gonna just go ahead and take the dark and just put it into the sky area here, just for the sake of time. But I just wanted you to see, like when you build up a painting with glazes, it's always, you have to let things dry, then do a dark transparent layer over everything, then come back in and pull out your highlights again. And what it does is it builds up these very gradual, rich, intense black values. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take alizarin crimson, which is the transparent red. And I think I'll go ahead and use some blue again. And I want to use black, but I'm going to avoid it for now. So I'll just use blue and red. And I'm going to go ahead and put another layer on here. I'm going to not paint on the moon because it's wet, and if I paint on it, it's gonna blend for now. But you could paint over that whole moon, and then what it does is it unifies everything when you do this. When you paint with these glazes and just layer the glazes, It will unify your things. So you can see it's a different technique than the Alla prima technique, but there's some real beautiful effects that you can get this way. I'm just going to stick to this side for now. Now there is this lighter blue in there, so I'm going to take some of my Naples, or actually some titanium white. If I had cerulean blue, that could be a good one to use. And take some titanium white, and I'm actually going to mix it into some glaze. Got a little yellow in there. And let's see what happens. I want to try to blend here to get that gradation. So I'm just going to use a little bit of white. Oops. And a soft bristle brush. See, and this is why I would say, like, do the silhouettes of the trees maybe once you get that gradation established in the sky or on your horizon. Like, you might wait till the very, very, very end to do the silhouettes in this case. So you might be able to see that. I'm trying to get that gradation from light to darker blue. There's like a halo there. You got to do a lot of blending. We use a soft brush, try to blend that. Okay. And then, and I didn't blend it as well as it should be. And then on top of this whole thing, I would do another layer of glaze. Like, I would probably do another blue layer to get that really royal, intense blue. If I wanted to get that, that's in the painting, or sorry, in the photograph. Okay. I'm going over. So I just have some blue on here now. And I'm going over the whole thing with this. Normally I'd let that white dry, but with it being wet, it does help blend it a little bit more. I'm going to take another dark glaze now and work from the top down. So this has purple in it. But like I said, you really want to wait with a lot of this. If you want those really smooth transitions and really smooth values, I would say wait. I'm working pretty fast here. But use your glazing medium. That's going to help you with blending. I kind of like, doing a combination of the two techniques, to be honest. And I often will. So there's, you can see that's blended a little bit more there. So from here, I'd maybe let this dry and then paint the trees over the top in silhouette. So I hope that gives you an idea of how to approach that glazing technique. Try it on your own. Give yourself a lot of time to do it, and just see what effects you can get. I mean, there's really so many things you can do with using the glaze, building up transparent layers, blending your paints. So I hope you all enjoyed this lesson. Here's our two different paintings. We have this one and this one. So there's a little bit of a different style there. One is blended and smooth. One is a little bit thicker, juicier, more painterly, but both are great techniques to use and just to have in your little tool belt of painting. I think it's nice to do a painting with both of these techniques. Maybe part of the surface is glazed and then you build up paint in one area, and do the alla prima in that area. Okay, so this is really fun. Thanks, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. Send me your paintings when they're done. Lisa, fun having two going at once. Started to bring the glaze into the second. Totally. Paulette, so fun. Thanks, Paulette. Thanks, Lisa. Pretty cool and challenging. Thank you. Oh, you're so welcome, Connie. I will say I often have at least two paintings going at the same time in general for this reason. Like one needs to dry, go work on the other one. And they'll inform each other. And so like in general, when you're working on something in your studio, try doing more than one painting at a time. I usually recommend that when I was teaching the series painting class, painting a series of paintings, I would say paint at least two at a time, sometimes three or four. Even with mixed media, it's fun to do that. Okay, well, next week we're gonna have a Halloween party. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but we're gonna have a Halloween party and we're gonna do Halloweeny mixed media fun. I think I wanna make eye masks out of our creations. So think about working on paper next week and bringing things that, I don't know, feathers, things you want to work with, baubles you want to work with to make some kind of a interesting mask. So we'll talk about that next week. Have a really fun week, everyone. Go ahead and vote, please. And thanks to everyone who's working in the polls. We can't be here today. All right. See you next week. Bye.